Here we are, everyone. We have issue 65, the review. So let's go ahead and get started. First part is the Firespray Special, Slave 1, Part 2. I don't recall Part 1. I think I mentioned this before. Maybe there was, but let's go ahead and go through this. One of only a few prototype Firespray models built on the Outer Rim. World of UVO 4, Slave 1 was not only a unique vessel on the space lanes, but infamous as well. Refitted, upgraded, and reconfigured on a number of occasions, this modified Firespray 31 class patrol and attack craft traveled the galaxy on the lookout for targets, piloted by the most feared bounty hunter of his time, Boba Fett. Following its years in the service of his father, Jango Fett, Boba began to modify Slave One heavily almost as soon as he inherited it, adding supplementary offensive and defensive systems to the ship, reconfiguring key parts of the Firespray and making it very much his own. In the arena of bounty hunting vessels, Slave One had no equal. After a period in his ownership, Fett eventually took Slave One to the galaxy-famed Quat drive yards for an extensive refit. Familiar with the vessel, Quat engineers operated to Fett's very exacting specifications. Firstly, the two rapid-fire laser cannons that had served Jango so well were replaced. Boba believed that the addition of an ion cannon would not only broaden the scope of his arsenal, but also add another string to his bow, the capacity to render ships ineffectively useless, not ineffectively, effectively useless, and bring in more targets alive. This gave him the opportunity to charge higher fees for his services. The second change was a concussion missile launcher giving Slave One extra heft for fighting larger vessels toe to toe. While a smart operator like Fett rarely engaged in such dangerous and profitless activities, the requirement was occasionally needed, and ever the pragmatist, Fett preferred to be ready for all contingencies. So this is Boba Fett when he was younger, sometime after his father had died, and before he grew into the Boba Fett that we know and many love. So high speed capacity, while small and small, understandable given the humble origins as a planet patrol craft, Slave One was blisteringly fast. In addition to three F-31 engines positioned along the bottom of the ship, it also carried an advanced uh, 1X or X1 twin ion engine to boost its speed. Its array of four XF-16 generators was more than capable of powering the ship, and its X0.7 hyperdrive multiplier could hurl it into hyperspace and across the galaxy at incredible velocity. Cockpit orientation. While Jango and Boba were both comfortable piloting Slave One in either its horizontal or vertical modes, Boba had a clear preference for the cockpit of his refitted Slave One to be upright. Landing on its underside, the vessel would swing 90 degrees to the upright position. As one of many upgrades, the cockpit was refitted with stabilization system, which meant the cockpit always remained upright. So that'd be somewhat similar to like a B1 or not a B1, uh, a B fighter. You know, the ones that kind of look like a cross. Extra firepower. As well as upgrading the ship's weapons, Boba Fett made an ordnance change where Jango had specified projectile launchers. Boba switched to more powerful proton torpedoes. Rarely required and costly to replace, the bounty hunter believed he needed their devastating impact over the munitions his father preferred. Boba Fett also made the decision to fit a small but powerful tractor beam projector. Even though it was only a miniature model, it still took up valuable room on the ship, and given his fearsome reputation, many were surprised at Fett's decision to install such a non-destructive system. However, the tractor beam was essential for hauling in other ships that had been incapacitated by the disruptive pulse of the ion cannon. The stark truth was that a living bounty was far more valuable than a dead one. Cultivating the mystique. Not all FET's editions were paid for in cash. Slave 1 was fitted with a sensor masking and jamming array that the bounty hunter stole from another ship. With the Firespray now practically invisible to sensors, FET was able to land on almost any planet without challenge. Even the security-heavy docking procedures required on Coruscant could be avoided, adding yet another layer to FET's mystique, the element of surprise. When Django owned the ship, he had changed the internal structure to include Spartan living quarters for both himself and his son. Now that he traveled alone, Boba made further changes, reducing the living space and installing holding cells for his captured bounties. The more space for prisoners, the more bounties he could collect. The last major change was a cosmetic one. Boba had the hull of the Firespray repainted, changing it from the blue and silver of his father's time to a green, red, and gunmetal scheme. At its heart, the same ship, Boba Fett's Slave One, soon acquired a level of notoriety that the vessel had never achieved before. Springing the trap on Bespin. Perhaps the most infamous mission of Boba Fett's Slave One was the hunt for Han Solo, tasked by Sith Lord Darth Vader to find and bring back the rebel sympathizer. Fett used both his ingenuity and the stealth-laden packages on his ship to accomplish his mission. Hiding in the garbage spewed out by the Imperial Star Destroyer Avenger, Slave One located and tracked the Millennium Falcon to the Bespin system. The ship's sensor mask and jamming system made her all but invisible, even to the Falcon's formidable sensors, allowing Fett to follow not far behind and plot their destination. Their information was relayed to the Empire once Vader was satisfied. Solo, who along with Princess Leia, C-3PO, and Chewbacca were merely the bait for Vader's true prey, Luke Skywalker, was handed to Fett to take to Jabba the Hutt on Tatooine. So yeah, that's just kind of the thing. Between the two trilogies, the internal structure of Slave One was changed significantly, as is often the case. This was taken as an opportunity rather than a problem. The original plans for Boba Fett Slave One, as first seen in Empire Strikes Back, had the ship configured to be flown in its horizontal position, while the later designs for Attack of the Clones have the internal structure configured for when the space transport is in its vertical mode, as seen in the Geonosis asteroid chase. In-universe explanations would reveal that Boba altered the cockpit during his ownership, so it remained upright when the vessel, much like the cockpit of a B-1 fighter. There you go, the B-wing fighter. And this is kind of showing this here. If you can make this out, kind of shows the cockpit here and in relationship to the rest of the ship. Visiting Vassek 3. Vassek itself is a small blue-green planet in the system to which it gave its name. Part of the Wasta sector, Vassek is far enough from the Coda Spur hyperspace route to ensure it doesn't receive many visitors. Since the system offers no resources that cannot commonly be found on other planets with far less effort, Vassek and its planets are noted and named but normally ignored. With a breathable atmosphere and standard gravity, the third moon of the Vassek is tolerable for the majority of oxygen breathers in the galaxy, but the moon is surrounded in dense perpetual mist and has no vegetation bigger than lichen. The thick fog means that any view of the moon's surface is normally obscured from space, although rare glimpses of Vassek 3's rocky surface can be seen through breaks in the mist. Landing on the moon can be treacherous, as the vapors mean that anyone trying to find a suitable landing area has to rely on scanning instruments and sensors to find a safe way in, unless, of course, the visitor is a Jedi or Sith with force powers that can be channeled to guide them down. Otherwise, the moon is generally unremarkable. Although it played a pivotal role in the outcome of the Clone Wars, it was here that the course of the conflict was very nearly changed forever. The tangle of sharp, towering mountains, plunging gorges, and tall columns of the moon held a secret, as at the end of an inconspicuous and somewhat ordinary canyon was a cliff face into which was cut the castle of General Grievous. We'll go into the secret hideout and then we'll finish this here. Um, Three main access points led into Grievous's castle. The main entrance was at the end of an approach along a gorge where visitors encountered a huge ornate doorway in a triangular arch resembling a giant spearhead. This was deliberately imposing and intimidating and was surrounded with glowing red lights to add to the effect, and anyone approaching from the rear would find a second similar entrance, but both of these access points were designed so that anyone approaching would assume that the doors opened in their entirety, but in reality, they were sealed against any such encroachment. At both sides of the castle, the real way to in was via much smaller doors at ground level, which were built into the the larger hole, like postern gates. These were only to be opened by triggering a section of the ornamental detail that was all but indistinguishable from the rest of the design. There was a small landing pad located at the rear where the third entry point was a big circular hatch large enough to accommodate Grievous's personal starfighter, the Soulless One. There you go. Um, this is this looming fortress was gloomy and depressing place, and it was here that Grievous would come to brood over the life he had lost when he was transformed into a cyborg killer. But this was more than just a home to Grievous. As befitted the commander of the droid armies of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, Grievous's secret citadel was a nightmare of deadly traps for anyone foolish enough to enter. The castle was where the cyborg general kept the majority of his spare parts, along with his own personal surgeon and even his favorite pet, called Gore. But while the fortress was designed to be a secure retreat, it was infiltrated by Count Dooku, who used it as a trap to test Grievous to his absolute limits. Frustrated by the stalemate in the war and General Grievous's seemingly unwillingness to engage and kill Jedi, Dooku led the High Council to believe that the fugitive Viceroy Newt Gunray had fled to the Vassek system. A small Republic team, commanded by Jedi Master Kit Fisto, tracked the homing beacon of a transport stolen by Gunray to the third moon of Vassek, where, instead of finding the Viceroy, they discovered the lair of the General. Grievous's pet. We'll get this one done here. Gore was a male rogwart, which General Grievous kept in the castle as a guard and a pet. Gore was one of the few creatures that Grievous cared for, and during the General's frequent absences he was cared for by his master's medical droid, EVA-4D. Rogwarts are large, predatory, non-sentient beasts armed with long claws and two horns that curve forward, while their sticky projectile tongue can draw in the prey towards its large, sharp teeth. Even their tail ends in three uh, prehensile graspers that can impale a captive, while their tough, muscular bodies can shrug off blaster shots, even some lightsaber wounds. Gore became even more fearsome after EVA-4D grafted four cybernetic limbs to his back and attached an exoskeleton of battle armor to his body. Like his master, the Rogwart was given a chest plate to shield his vital organs and a helmet to protect his brain case. Kalish warlords historically took Rogwarts as trophies from the Behevrian homeworld of Utica. The creatures have an aggressive nature, and only those taken from the nest at a young age are able to be trained as pets or guardians. When the Republic task force infiltrated Grievous's castle, Gore was already shrieking with hunger and violently attacked the intruders. One of the clones was killed before two Jedi managed to dispatch the Rogwart. Grievous was enraged by his pet's death, which became another reason why he hated the Jedi. A deadly trap. When Fisto, his former Padawan Nadar Veb, and a squad of clone troopers found the castle gates, the others thought they would have to cut or blast their way in. But guided by his intuition and the Force, Fisto was keen to enter undetected. He was able to discover the hidden trigger that made the door rumble open, and the team stepped into a long, stone-flagged corridor. Intricate pipework along the ornate walls held light globes that cast confusing shadows down the passageway, so that the team found it almost impossible to decipher which dark areas hid doorways, blind alcoves, or solid walls. At the end of the corridor, an arch led into the sanctum overlook, where a walkway led over a plunging fall. A single throne-like seat, complete with communications panel, dominated the room. It was here that Fisto and the team found a hologram of Newt Gunroy, which switched to Count Dooku to explain the challenge they faced from the return of Grievous. While the Separatist general was badly damaged in the fight that followed and Gore was killed, Grievous managed to gain the upper hand. Kit Fisto was the only survivor of the encounter, fleeing the castle and escaping from the Vassek system in his Jedi starfighter. A little bit of backstory, part of our behind the scenes. By the time Dave Filoni and the rest of the creative team on the Clone Wars animated series came to season 1 episode Lair of Grievous, there was already an established backstory to Grievous's past in the expanded universe. George had a lot of ideas about Grievous, Filoni said, where he thought Grievous came from and what he thought Grievous was about. One of the things that was that he had really wanted to be a Jedi. Without entirely dismissing the existing background, Dave Filoni and episode writer Henry Gilroy focused the subtext of the episode on the pursuit of power and the cost of the chase. In seeking to emulate the Jedi in his personal quest for power, Grievous gives up his humanity and is consumed by the quest. It's not only by accident that the cry of pain from Grievous was as his droid surgeon operates on him is his death scream from Revenge of the Sith. So there you go. A little bit about Grievous. Life of smuggling. This is part of our Secrets of Space Flight. If trade and travel were restricted, there would be no contraband and no smugglers. As it is, the many legal controls on shipments of particular goods to certain locations, the taxes charged on the import and export of other commodities, mean that there is lucrative rewards to be had by circumventing the regulations. This makes smuggling contraband an attractive option for all sorts of individuals who operate on the fringes of legitimate trade. Outlaw society. Social etiquette and protocol mean nothing to the galaxy's outlaw community. Galactic smuggling dens, which are more numerous than authorities care to admit, are populated by individuals from all echelons of society who have had every job imaginable, from the manual workers at one of the skill pool to highly educated technicians at the other. Whether you're working on your own or joining a gang, you need to get a read on your rivals and compatriots. After all, you never know when one-time Rebel Alliance fighter might throw his lot in with a gang, not knowing that it's headed by the former stormtrooper who torched his family home. Very true. The allure of smuggling. Every smuggler has a different reason for their choice of occupation. Dreams of a life of wild adventure, excitement, and real danger may have turned to reality for a bored laborer who left his work to join a smuggling racket. The attraction of copious amounts of ready cash can also prove far more alluring than the hand-to-mouth existence promised to corporate drones, factory hands, landspeeder sales associates, restaurant workers, miners, storekeepers, and street cleaners. Sometimes people just drift into smuggling, working their way around the galaxy, moving from one menial job to another, building up contacts with the lower echelons every time they do so, with the hope that this new life in defiance of galactic authority will be better than the last dead end job. Many carry on their old profession, using it as a front to hide the nefarious trade from which they really derive most of their income. Some start off as plain and simple spacers, legitimately hauling cargo and passengers from one spaceport to another. Operators in that line of work get to meet all sorts. They may include starport support and security personnel, spacers from other obscure or exotic locations than their own, and a shady smuggler or two. Over time, the monotony of spending so much time either between planets or between jobs gets to some pilots. So they quit their own small time operation or stop working for a big freight hauling conglomerate, not the easiest thing to say, and make contact with the smugglers who have crossed their paths and joined the smuggling racket. The simple camaraderie of the outlaw life is equally enough to see some farmers turn their backs on their lonely profession. Working long hours on the far reaches of the settlement takes its toll on both the laborer and his boss. In many parts of the galaxy, such jobs come with added danger of raiding parties, stealing animals and crops in the dead of the night. For some, feels like the choice is either suicide or smuggling. Let's talk about some smuggling compartments. Starships and other vessels contain voids and hollows that can be modified to make compartments in which to hide contraband from customs searches. Mere possession of such concealed spaces is often contr- contravention of local ordinance, but for maximum security, the compartments can even be welded shut. High value goods can be concealed in a very small space, but in the case of the Millennium Falcon, it proved possible to modify part of the ring corridor to fit sizable smuggling compartments under the floor. Han Solo, Chewbacca, Luke Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and their droids successfully hid themselves in these compartments when the freighter was pulled into the Death Star. Many years later, Ray, Finn, and BB-8 did the same, but were discovered by Solo and Chewbacca, who knew the location of the secret hiding place that had fooled the Imperial searchers. A stark choice. Others turn to smuggling because legitimate occupations are barred to them. For those who choose to blend in, perhaps with a new name while on the run from the galactic authorities, business rivals, or former employees, there is relative safety in the company of a smuggling gang. No one in any honest line of work wants to employ an ex-prisoner, which is why so many former convicts end up becoming smugglers. Some ex-cons find themselves in such company after serving their time. Others join gangs to hide out while on the run after a prison break. Whichever way it is, stories of the life on the inside of a prison planet like Kessel or Severcos can be chilling. For some former soldiers, smuggling, with its disregard of galactic law and order, is a direct contrast to the rules and regulations of a military life. They turn their backs on careers in the Galactic Empire's armed forces, local planetary authorities, and sometimes the Rebel Alliance too. Such smugglers come with all the advantages of military training, which include having contacts in all the galactic locations where they have served, friends and enemies. By choosing to live outside the law, many smugglers risk as much from the criminal fraternity as they do from the customs enforcement agencies. The form of justice meted out for perceived misdemeanors between outlaws is usually harsh and frequently terminal. Han Solo was unfortunate enough to have seasoned bounty hunters set after him. They were hired by Tatooine gangster Jabba the Hutt after Solo dumped a a shipment of spice he was smuggling for the crime lord before he was boarded by Imperial inspectors. The Galactic Empire also put a price on Solo's head after he helped Luke Skywalker rescue Princess Leia Organa from the Death Star, as well as for his participation in the deadly assault on the battle station over Yavin. And our final behind the scenes here, we have the history of smuggling. Modern smuggling is usually thought of as an unattractive activity, trafficking in the worst kind of drugs, illegal arms, and desperate migrants. But uh, but just over a century ago, smuggling was engaged in by all manner of otherwise honest folk on the coastal communities. Landing a tub of spirits or tobacco without paying duty was a common occurrence on the south shore of Isle of Wight, for example. During the days, the smugglers worked as fishermen and farm laborers, and even manned the lifeboats when the ships became imperiled offshore. All hands worked to save the lives of the crew and passengers, but once nothing more could be done for the people and the vessel began to break up, all eyes turned to the cargo, which found its way into barns and hedgerows for distribution on the black market. The whole population are smugglers, wrote Sidney Dobell when he visited the island village of Knighton in 1860. Everyone everyone has an ostensible occupation, but nobody gets money from it. Here are fishermen who never fish, and farmers whose farming consists of standing like herons on lookout posts. Years later, in Back of the White, Yarns of Wrecks and Smuggling, Fred Mew wrote, while one, of course, knows that these men were lawbreakers, yet when one thinks of the miserable wage many of them were getting at their daily work, we cannot confess but to some sympathy for them, as were it not for the money received from this source, they could never have lived and brought up large families as they did. So there you go, smuggling. Well, that is the end of issue 65. Um, that was a two-part issue, as you can recall. We finished painting the lower hull, and that is because I'm anticipating doing the upper hull very, very soon. So the next issue, we're going to get these parts here, and those are going to go in one of the inserts. So we'll get that prepped and ready to go. I'm guessing we'll be putting that together. We'll see what happens in issue 66. So I guess I will see you guys all in issue 66. May the force be with you always.